Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast where we explore the meaning and power of the most important story in business, the one that answers why someone should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. Today, we're honored to have Christoph Trappe as our guest. Christoph is a master storyteller. He's helped companies share their unique stories more efficiently and better to reach prospects and retain existing customers. And he's run content marketing campaigns across many industries, including healthcare, nonprofits, SaaS, publishing, technology, professional services. Most recently, he led an integrated content strategy team at a market research software platform and increased the company's online share of voice while driving awareness with prospects and the industry through content. Christoph, welcome to Storylines Live.
Paul, nice to see you. Nice to hear you.
Yeah,
always happy to talk about business storytelling, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on Storylines Live is because you are also a podcaster. You have a great podcast. Could you tell our audience a little bit about it?
The Business Storytelling Show. We now have over 600 some episodes, and some great guests have been on there, including yourself, Seth Godin, Jeff Boulis is coming on, or has been on by the time this comes out.
Right.
Joe Polizzi, Christina Podnar, all kinds of different people. I can't even go through the list. There's so many. Ayelet Fishbach. And we have conversations about storytelling. How do you tell better stories? How do you stay in front of people? And it's been a great way to really have conversations with people I probably wouldn't meet any other way, right? Because,
yes,
who nowadays goes, hey, let's have a Zoom coffee? There's only so much time in the day. So it's really been a great way to connect with people and, of course, also kind of grow that audience. The Business Storytelling Show is now also on television. dbtv.tv is where you can find it. It's you can watch it on any TV set in the United States as long as it's smart TV through Roku. So that's kind of an exciting addition as well.
Congratulations, Christoph. That's very cool. Folks, Christoph's one of the top podcasters in the world. His show is in the top, I want to say 0.5% now. Christoph, am I right on that?
I thought the last number I saw was 1.5, but I try not to refresh the stats every day.
I think you might be moving up. I might have misstated a little bit, but listen, this is a top podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, and it's, as you pointed out, available on video on Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. And folks, will have lots more about that in the show notes, so you can go and check it out yourself. Christoph, we always ask guests on the show about their capital S story. And the way we describe it at our firm, this is the story above all others that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. From your perspective in your work, is there one of those four that's more important to you in what you do?
When I actually wrote that down when you were talking about work for you, buy from you, invest in you. And what's interesting is, especially now when, it's so hard to find employees or find the right employees, right? People have expectations. Look at the whole thing about going back to an office, and I'm still thinking, why do I have to be in an office? Do you have a studio like this in your office? No, right? So it's kind of like, it doesn't make any sense for what I do, quite frankly. I think they all go hand in hand. You have good employees, right? It makes you tell better stories. Once you have, people investing in you, and that could look a number of different ways, right? Like actual investors, or even, how do you reinvest the revenues that you bring in, or the profits, I guess. But at the end of the day, a company is not a company if you don't have customers, right?
Yes.
Maybe we should call that a hobby, I guess. So it is
lifestyle business, right? Yeah.
Well, this is my hobby.
Yeah.
So you do have to bring in customers, and you have to tell a story that's relevant to them. And what's interesting to me Two is there's a lot of people, they kind of they drive fear into people. If you don't do this, this will happen. And there's a time and place for some of those stories, but some people just kind of push that too far, in my opinion. And you really, to build that long-term relationship, you got to know what your target buyers, what they actually want, what they need help with, and then how can you help them with that, and then kind of keep getting in front of them with that story, but also related stories. It's not just about a product feature, even though it can be, but it's also about, the related areas. What does the workflow look like? What does this look like? So how do you keep drawing them in to pay attention to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a book that a bestseller on Amazon that I was asked to contribute to called Ready, Connect, Grow. And the title of my chapter in that book was Your Story is a Diamond with Many Facets. And so to your point, an organization's story is its story. But as you pointed out, what interests the customers or what interests the employees or the partners in business, so many organizations have partners, is a little bit different aspect of the story, right? What we've learned in our work is there is an overall story, but the same thing that gets people to buy your shoes or your business services is not necessarily the reason that it's going to attract employees, right? It's a different thing entirely. And Christoph, you've been at this talking about business storytelling for quite a while. What led you to start the podcast?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I always like to learn new things, and if you listen to like the first episodes, it's literally just me on a phone walking around a track while I'm traveling and talking about different things. So it wasn't highly produced at all. It was just like I was just trying different things. How do I do this? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And so the first few episodes are kind of like some of them even have like the background music, the whole episode, right? Because horrible, but that's kind of how you kind of get started. And when I met Jeff Boulis actually in India at a conference, he said, "This is my first blog post. Look how horrible that was." And of course, that was many years before that. So it's kind of the same thing. And right. Then what happened is I just kind of kept going. And then I said, oh, now I can use Anchor to invite guests. So I was recording in the Anchor app, which is now Spotify for podcasters. Yes. They bought Anchor. And you can just do it in the app. And you could literally sit anywhere. In fact, that was how I recorded my podcast episode with Seth Godin. He didn't, at that time, we were just moving into video, but it didn't work out because it was like right at the edge of when I was making that move. Mm-hmm. And so I'm literally on my phone, in my hand, on my couch, interviewing Seth Godin because the app is on my phone anyways, right? Right. And then at some point, actually, Jason Falls, who does run the Marketing Podcast Network, and, I was on one of his shows and he was talking about using like a live streaming software to do video live stream, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of how I got into the whole, maybe we should do a live stream. Maybe we should do video. Maybe we should record. And then from there, it went into Spotify now has video. Then I went on TV. So it just kind of like, I just wanted to learn, and then it kind of built on each other. And of course, now, 500,000 plus downloads later, it's really hard to like go, oh, maybe we shouldn't do it now anymore, because now people listen to it. Plus, it is actually very beneficial to have it. You learn a lot. It does help with building your personal brand. But to be perfectly truthful about how it all started, it started because I wanted to learn how to do it. How does it work? And then, kind of it evolved from there.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I think the best podcasts, the ones that are my favorites, Christoph, are the ones where the host is on something of a journey, right? Exploring a topic, right? And then we're in it together. It's not telling, it's a conversation, right? Well, of all the things that you could have focused on, why storytelling?
So I think that was a move from journalism. I think I grew up in Germany, and I, was influenced by journalists who would go to the same gym that I would go to as a teenager. And they always had the best stories, and I was like, oh, how do you know all this stuff? And I said, well, I'm a journalist, we're a journalist, and this is what you do as a journalist, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of where I started. And I became a journalist, went to college to become a sports writer. Never actually never actually worked a full-time day as a sports writer in my life. It's probably a good thing. I like my sleep instead of staying up all night.
Exactly. I would say as a former journalist of 2 decades, you made the right decision, especially today. But so that's how you got into storytelling, right? And then the learning is the podcast, right? And the marriage of those two is what?
Yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. And then at some point I made the switch over into storytelling in the training industry, and then moved into marketing, which is a very typical career progression, I guess, for journalists, right? And I made that move before journalism kind of started all these big layoffs, but who knows what would have happened. I mean, certainly it has changed quite a bit, but I moved over into marketing and content marketing, ran across Joe Polizzi's conference. So I've attended that for a number of years. Early on, especially spoke there, and then just kind of, moved to journalism strategies into corporate marketing, right? Because if you think about it, that's still what I do. I write articles, I write content, and I interview people to get content for those articles. It's literally what a journalist does.
Yeah, it's that my progression is well, 2 decades in journalism. And my last job, not the only job, but the last job I had was editor of a business publication. And, folks, companies tell crappy stories. And it is not the job of journalists or your employees or your customers or your investors or your partners to make your story better. It is your job as a leader in your organization to be clear about the purpose of that organization. And in other words, the story behind it. And we're going to dig into that next. We're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk specifically about how Christoph helps companies do just that. Folks, we're back with Christoph Trappe, the host of the Business Storytelling Show, one of the top-rated podcasts in the world and an expert on storytelling. Christoph, let's dig into how you work with organizations and how you help them do a better job of sharing their story.
Let's do it. Everything, the big difference, we talked about journalism earlier, to what I do today is when I was a journalist, nothing was performance driven ever. Right. I mean, nobody looked at the numbers. It was in print, and then we had a website and people looked at that, but they were like, yeah, whatever, like nobody, paid. And I know today that has changed, but today I work for a growth marketing firm, Growgetter, Growgetter.io. And basically, what I do is I help companies create better content, create better stories, and then drive results with those stories. And the way you do that, quite frankly, is you have to tell unique stories. So you can't just go anymore and say, hey, I want to rank for business storytelling. Let me write an article and say, what is business storytelling? Blah, blah, blah. And I do have an article that covers some of those things on ChristophTrappe.com. Mm-hmm. But you have to go deeper. You have to bring your own personal story to it, your personal experience, your personal point of view. Sometimes you see those people on Twitter or maybe now on Threads, who knows, where, they have a very controversial view and then everybody comments. And guess what? Their goal was to get that message spread. Now, I wouldn't recommend that necessarily to go to that extreme, but that is a strategy actually to get in front of people. So what's unique about what you have to say, what you can offer, what you can add to the discussion? Right. And the way I do that, we touched on that briefly, Paul, is multi-channel, right? What are the best channels? I still think a podcast is a great way to do it. You can repurpose this stuff all over the place. It's so easy, right? You can live stream podcasts now. I actually wrote a book on that topic, going live. And, then you put it on all these different podcast channels, and then you can write articles from the podcast interviews. You can do social media updates. I mean, like the list doesn't end. There's so many options to do it. You can tie it into paid campaigns. So I think that's kind of my MO. What's the best chance to get the content to perform? And how do we throw the content at parade and get the most out of it?
Wow. So that's really great. I got 2 things out of what you just shared. Number one, you got to be sharing a good story. And as you mentioned, and there's a number of phrases that describe this, some of them not suitable for work, are people who will get on social media and just basically drop a bomb, and they'll get attention, but it doesn't really create a conversation, which is what a story is. It's pulling people in, and they're part of what's happening. So, seeing an angry tweet or whatever it is, you may get clicks and likes or comments, but what you're talking about is more than that. And the second part of what you said is just so critical. You could be the best singer in the world, but if you're in the Australian outback and a couple of wild animals and one or two residents of a desolate, dusty town are your only audience, is anybody ever going to know your story and how good you are? And your point is, you need to be out there in the right places, in front of the right audiences at the right time. Multi-channel, right? That's today's world, right?
You have to do it. And, people undervalue sometimes, I think, the multiple touch points.
Yes.
We have to have. And I think it was actually, again, not to pick on him, but Jason Falls talked about that, how affiliate marketing companies, or when they work with influencers, they undervalue all of those touch points, right? They say, we only pay you if you drive the sale. And, the reality is that, yes, we all want to drive sales, but to get to a sale, especially the higher the price goes, you need whatever the numbers, 7, 15, 30. I'm not going to make up the right number here, but, we know it's more than one. So why would we not pay the influencer for 1 to 3 touch points to help us get there? So keep that in mind too. You have to reach people in all kinds of different places. That can be in person, that can be on social, can be on the website, can be on email, can be wherever, on a podcast channel, whatever it might be. So keep that in mind, that you have to reach people more than once. And the other thing I want to say to that is, especially on social media, don't put too much stock into the whole engagement thing. Yes, we want people to engage and like and share and comment, but a lot of times people don't. And I've had some of the best clients, they've never commented once on anything, but they always saw it, and they even commented on it in meetings and whatnot.
Yeah, that's such great points. If you go back in the history of marketing, the concept of multiple touch points definitely predates the podcasts, social media. 5 to 7 was the number that I saw, so frequently, going back in resources back to the 70s. But it's become more difficult today, and your point is so good. I saw this article not too long ago. Supposedly, and depending on the study you want to believe, in the Middle Ages, a person would learn in their entire lifetime less knowledge than in a single day's issue of the New York Times. That just blows my mind. Then another study that I saw not too long ago, but business leaders are subjected to between 5 to 10,000 different messages a day. That's everything from notifications on our computers, on our phones, texts, digital signboards, blah, 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 blah. So if we're going to cut through the digital clutter, we got to be sharing a great story. And to your point, it's got to be there multiple times. Just a quick funny story. Some years ago, we worked at our firm with a wealth management company, and they would regularly survey their clients to see how they heard about them. And one of the choices was, I saw your billboard. They never advertised on billboards. Do you know how many people check that? A lot. And that just goes to show you that, well, today, with all the tools we have available to us in the electronic world, we can do a much better job of tracking activity. To your point, you're not always going to see the activity, and there's going to be a factor in there where we don't know for sure. We just don't. So we need to be reaching people in the right place at the right time. Christoph, do you have an example of a client success story that kind of brings this to life, or one that you think particularly showcases the kind of work that you do?
Client success stories. So most recently, I work with Vox Pop Me, as you mentioned earlier, a market research software company. And the way we really stepped up the share of voice and visibility and everything, it's just, first of all, we did a podcast, and then we also wrote articles from that podcast. And what happened is, all of a sudden there's all this content out there and all these different channels, and you're ranking for the right thing. So there is a little bit of strategy involved, right? I mean, you do, it's kind of an interesting balance too, because you want people on the podcast that have a specific topic, but then also, how does that topic actually tie together with, with something people search for, right? So sometimes you do want to do some keyword research. And I know, especially podcasts, I mean, podcasts rank too nowadays, maybe not on the Google podcast app, which is completely strange to me, since that is Google, but Spotify, Apple, etc., they do show up in search results pretty prominently.
Yes.
So just make sure you kind of have those topics, you kind of get on a good schedule. I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to really driving growth with content, is you have to keep going. Yes, you can see quick results. Yes, you can move the needle quickly, especially to ramp up your revenue too. But you want to make sure that, you can't just do 8 podcast episodes. Like, I think the number I heard, most podcasts have like 12 episodes or fewer, and you're just not going to see the results, honestly, after that. I don't care how well you promote them or whatever it might be. There's some exceptions, like some of those true crime podcasts by the New York Times, they got 12 episodes, but that's different. Most of us are not the New York Times.
That is absolutely right.
So you do want to kind of keep going and make sure you have that long-term strategy and long-term grip to really go after it.
Right. I mean, it's a long-term play. In marketing, you have the Super Bowl commercials, which, those air once, typically speaking, although we could talk for an entire hour about how those are remarketed to create greater impact. But I think a lot of folks in business will look at that, and that's not a model for the rest of us. We're not going to drop 2 or 3 million or 6 million on a Super Bowl campaign, and then people are going to talk about it all year long. In order to create the kinds of conversations that drive business, we need to be out there consistently. And to your point, that's why podcasts are one of several great vehicles to make that happen. But you do need to be consistent, right? Yeah,
absolutely. You need to stay out there. You need to keep going. You need to try new things, and have good guests on. And it's not always the same guest. So that's one of the things that just drives me crazy, when every podcast has all the same guests, and at some point, I mean, I get it, maybe you have a different audience, but to touch on the Super Bowl ads really briefly, it is so interesting anyways, because these huge campaigns, sometimes they set the tone for other campaigns and other projects, right? And people, they saw some video take off and they go, oh, can we get millions of views? And my answer is there even millions of buyers in the vertical you're going after? Is there? Because if there's not, why do you need millions of views? You just need the majority of that market seeing your thing, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. There was a website, and it was like old school music, or I don't know, I can't like old school instruments.
Right.
And I said, how many people actually play these instruments worldwide?
Yeah.
And it was a number, I think, I want to say North America maybe was like under 100,000, maybe roughly over, right around, let's say 100,000 for argument's sake. So if you have 500,000 views, who are those people? There's not even that many people in the vertical.
Exactly. Yeah, and at our firm, we've worked with some very, very, very narrow B2B companies. We worked with a company a few years ago. They make enormous turbines, which move liquids and air. And if they sell 5 of them a year to somebody who's building a multi-billion-dollar chemical plant, they've had a good year. So, when we talked with them, it was this conversation, but in the extreme. Like, really, how many people do you need to reach? Okay, they needed to reach 50 potential organizations. There's more people than 50, but let's say 500 at the most, right? So to your point, the definition of success has got to be relevant to the audience you're trying to reach, right? And, if I'm selling something to everybody like soap or toothpaste, okay, then maybe a Super Bowl ad is the right place to be. But if I need to educate people and share the story and the why behind what we do, maybe something like a podcast is a better approach to really get people acquainted with what it is that we do and why they might want to engage with us, right?
Absolutely. And I don't even know if people are in the mood to buy anyways when they watch the Super Bowl.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not ready to buy them. And I think most people watch the Super Bowl ads now for like to see if they're creative or not. And a lot of them are not as creative as they used to. Not to harp on the good old days here, but it certainly seems like they're not as funny, they're not as engaging as they used to. But I don't know. If I see a vehicle, and I know vehicle marketing is different anyways, but if I see a vehicle in the Super Bowl ad, I'm not going to go run out and buy that Lexus today just because I saw it on the Super Bowl ad, you know?
Yeah, well, exactly. And just to put a pin on that one, in my book, Finding Your Capitalist Story, the introduction is all about the Super Bowl ad that Chrysler did for the Chrysler 200 that featured Eminem and a choir and the Fox Theater in Detroit and all this stuff. And I'll certainly link to the book if folks want to take a look at that. But the bottom line on that is the car isn't even made anymore. And the ad didn't really deliver. That's one of the reasons why the car isn't even made anymore. And, that's not what we're trying to do here in helping companies do a better job of engaging with the audience is most important to them. Christoph, how can people find you in what you do?
Yeah, I'm on all the social networks, including Threads, which is relatively new here now. Interestingly, I was one of the first 200,000 people to sign up at the time of this recording. I think they're over 65 million or something like that by now. So early adopter, I guess, for that one. ChristopHTrappe.com is my website, the Business Story podcast. And of course, if you want to reach out for growth marketing, Growgetter.io.
That's awesome. Folks, those links will all be in the show notes so that if you're driving now or if you're doing something else, as so many do, and listening to a podcast, you don't have to write those down. We'll make sure those are in the show notes. Christoph, it's been a great honor to have you on the show. Thank you for being a guest with us. Folks, you really got to check out the work that he does. He is on the cutting edge, not only in the early adopters of Threads, but so many other aspects of content marketing, especially in the podcast world. Thanks again, Christoph, for being on today. And folks, we'll see you on the next episode of Storylines Live.